Good morning. Brian and I are really happy to be here today to share with you our experience that we've been going through most recently over the last year and a half perhaps, but actually it goes back about 5 years to how we got involved in automating our technical paper and journal article workflow. And we'd like to begin. We'd like to tell you a little bit about our organizations, just so you get a flavor of what I'm about and what Brian's company is about. Then I'd like to talk a little bit to why it was so important for SAE to make this transition, why we needed to look towards automation and efficiency, and then highlight some of the business challenges that were driving us to make this decision, along with some of the goals that we hope to achieve. Our 5-year journey outlines the steps that we took really to achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve, which were cost reduction, quick deployment of content, and improving the consistency and quality of our output. And then we'll wrap it up with talking about some of the next steps that we have planned, SAE, and then sharing with you some of the valuable lessons that we learned. I'd like to talk a little bit about SAE. We were founded in 1905, so we are a very old organization and founded as the Society of Automobile Engineers. And then in 1916, we changed our name to the Society of Automotive Engineers to better encompass the growing mobility interest. And today we are SAE International. And we're a global association committed to being the ultimate knowledge source of the engineering profession. We're a 501c3 operation with a $60 million operating budget. If you take into account our entire enterprise, we're about a $100 million operation. We have offices in the United States, England, and China. And our focus is really on providing knowledge solutions to industries. And to do this, we act on 2 priorities. The first is setting the standards for the mobility industry. And SAE is the vehicle-producing industry's single source for industry-driven, voluntary, consensus-based standards development. And in our repository of over 400,000 documents, 36,000 of those are industry standards. And then our other priority is lifetime learning. And SAE advocates this through what most organizations like mine do, industry conferences, professional development, and then through our publishing arm, we offer books, magazines, technology newsletters, and then what we're going to be talking about today, the technical papers and journal articles. And as I mentioned, our repository contains about 400,000 unique pieces of content. And then the emphasis for today is really going to be on the journey we started in 2010 to automate our publishing process. We publish about 3,000 technical papers and journal articles a year, and with nearly 50% of those being published in the first quarter with 6 people. Brian?
Thank you, Becky. So many of you might be familiar with Data Conversion Laboratory, but for those of you that aren't, let me just spend a few moments introducing us. Data Conversion Laboratory, our name is pretty synonymous with what we do, primarily data conversion from any format to any format. And while we haven't been around as long as SAE, we've been around for about 34 years, which is a pretty long time in the data conversion space. So we've seen just about everything and we've dealt with just about everything over time. So our bread and butter is data conversion, and that can be as simple as journal customers that come to us with PDFs every month or every quarter or every 2 months with the need to convert to JATs to put up on PubMed Central, on up to totally automated 24/7 lights out conversion processes that process millions of pages a month. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. We play in a lot of industries, traditional publishing, scientific, technical, and medical, but also with a lot of what I call accidental publishers, product companies that have documentation that they need to generate on a regular basis to support the release and sale of their products. We have a number of customers that like to do their own conversion, but they like our management approach, our QA approach, so we work in a hybrid situation with some customers where we help get them up and running and then QA their efforts as we go along. I mentioned the accidental publishers a moment ago. One of the big things in that space right now is shrinking your content footprint, and a lot of those customers have duplicate content across various documents or sets of documentation. So we offer content reuse analysis services. We have a product, a service offering called Harmonizer that analyzes large sets of content and identifies exact and close matches. It could be across thousands of pages or hundreds of thousands of pages of content. In terms of production services, we do a lot of work in ebook production services, and traditionally that's in books that might be fairly simple books, but complex textbooks, math, science, chemistry, those sorts of things. That's where DCO really shines, is in the more complex area of production. But also a lot of our journal customers are also asking us to produce journals or separate articles as ebook products. We offer editorial and composition services and also content consulting services, which really is where the project that we did with Becky and her team falls under. We've been broadening over the last few years our focus on helping customers strategize, helping customers look at their process and re-engineer process, helping customers look at tools and platforms and select technologies, and then from time to time helping them implement those technologies. Becky?
Okay. It's important to understand why SAE needed to change, and our organization serves the automotive, the aerospace, and commercial vehicle industries. And if you look over the past maybe 10 years, what's happened to those industries, and they were facing challenges that actually they needed to address to remain viable. So when SAE looked at the customer challenges our own customers were facing, as well as we had an aging product portfolio, we had an outdated publishing model, and technology was just flying by us. And the other thing we found that there was an increased competition in our market space, both from for-profits as well as for startups. So these challenges really said we need to take some action. So short term, we looked at cost restructuring and portfolio balancing. But long term, we had to take a different view of it. We had to think about what we were built on, and we were built on technical information. And our goal is to supply information. As I mentioned earlier, we wanted to be the knowledge source for the engineering profession. Well, recognizing that information is our fundamental cornerstone, what did we need to do? Well, we wanted to start thinking about what tools and information, technical know-how could we supply to engineers, not only to do their jobs better today, but to prepare them for the future. So SAE took this time to really take a look at how we were publishing information, how we were delivering information, to really say, what can we do differently? So moving from a print-based publishing model to a digital publishing environment really was the first major step in our transformational journey. And again, our goals in doing this were cost reduction, rapid deployment of content, and improve the output consistency and quality. I mentioned that we started this journey in 2010, but actually it started in 2008. So I have to give a little bit of background so you can see the progression. But in 2008, our board of directors approved a $4 million funding project to get us started on content management and automation of our publishing. And it was really through the direction of the board that we started to develop our robust content management strategy, and it was really going to change how we managed and we delivered information. In 2009, this was really our building year, and our content management system was built to our own specifications, and complementing that was our first XSL FO style sheet. Our tagging structure was developed using JATS, the NLM DTD, and we were ready to move forward. To test our tagging structure and to comply with what the board said they wanted us to do, manage our content, we took on the challenge of converting 85,000 technical papers dating back to 1906. That was a huge, huge opportunity to not only begin managing our content, but also to begin understanding whether or not what we were putting in place was really going to work. So we used multiple vendors to do the conversion. We ran it through a thorough QA process, and then we ingested it into our repository. And what we found, our tagging system was sound. It worked the way we needed it to work. Our ingestion processes functioned well, and we completed the conversion of 85,000 documents in 12 months. And then we readied ourselves for 2010. In 2010, I had a new team, new tools, new workflow, new system. Right there, you're saying, oh boy. But what we realized was, well, none of them had been fully tested either. So we were a brand new operation. And we also launched at SAE's biggest paper production time of the year, which was our World Congress. So we went through World Congress, and it wasn't pleasant. It was painful. But we got through it, and we also did a lessons learned after the initial launch of our content management system. And we identified over 100 issues that we needed to address regarding production, as well as our front-end piece of how we get information into us. But the two most significant issues that we faced were white space and placement of large figures. With white space, the white space could be up to a half of a column. And for large figures, we couldn't place them where they needed to be positioned within the document. So our only solution was to position them at the end of the document. And that led us to putting everything at the end. It really wasn't a good picture when we actually started publishing the documents. It just didn't look good. So my team was very upset with the results, as was I, as was the customer. So we had to start doing some things to really improve our process. But we also had two additional issues that in fact affected our quality as well as our productivity. And they were focused on, we needed multiple style sheets, and we had a journal selection process that was making us publish papers twice. With the multiple style sheets, the reason why we had those was we had, based on the copyright for the paper, there were 6 footers that could be used. So we had to maintain 6 style sheets because of the 6 different footers, meaning someone had to go in and select the correct style sheet every time we were publishing a paper. And then in 2010, because of the way our journal selection process was set up, we ended up publishing 21% of the papers twice. In 2011, we focused on addressing many of the issues which surfaced during our first year of implementation. And we made several improvements to the XSL FO and upgrades to our software. And we did address some of the quality issues. It was also during this time that we recognized, although we wanted to say we were digital, the print appearance was still very important to our customers and even to some of our product managers. So this brought the realization that our automated publishing process required some human intervention because we had to meet that printed page requirement. So we tackled the most glaring quality issues first. We looked at white space and we looked at the placement of large figures. We improved them fairly well, not to where we wanted to be, still not the quality we wanted. But during those first 2 years, we experienced many growing pains. We did improve our publishing process a little bit, but it was painful. But we were allowed, based on our initial introduction of the system in our 2 years, we were able to do some additional front-end work, which was working with our authors to provide them better resources to provide the input to us and to educate them that they no longer needed to format the paper. That was also going to help us in terms of productivity and efficiency. In 2012, we again did upgrades to our style sheet, but we also found that in 2012, our journal selection process changed. The journals team worked through having all the journal selections done prior to our publishing effort, meaning we could publish once. And then we also decided that because of our software, we were limited by what our software could do. We couldn't manage the formatting at all. What appeared. So what we decided to do was we really needed to look for a software that was going to give us the flexibility that would allow us to improve our efficiency. Again, we're publishing between 1,300 and 1,400 papers in between a 6 and a 9 week period. So we looked at InDesign, and we were thoroughly thrilled with InDesign. And this was our new direction. So we went down the path of looking for a vendor. And we found one, and our only criteria was they had to be experts in InDesign. Well, we found one, and during the first 3 years, in 2012, we implemented our first InDesign style sheet, and then the first 3 quarters of 2013, we gradually introduced InDesign to the team. During the first few months, only 2 members were trained to use the new style sheet, and that was to publish the more complex papers. This resulted in maintaining dual systems. So we had our original publishing system, and now we were also working with InDesign. So you can imagine the challenges that presented. We had to track and revise multiple style sheets as well as the XSLFO pieces. Every time we made a change to one, it had to trickle down through all of the pieces and all of the style sheets, and every one of those required user acceptance testing, a tremendous burden on workload. And then only technical papers could be published using the InDesign style sheet because we delayed the journal article style sheet because we were having so many issues with our original InDesign style sheet. But the nice thing was, it's a good and a bad kind of situation. The output that we got from InDesign, the quality was so good. So we knew we were on the right track. We knew it. We just didn't know that perhaps we had selected an inappropriate vendor, a vendor that really didn't have what we needed to do. Because as we introduced it, when we were going forward to do our publishing, we had a checklist that was just a laundry list of tweaks and adjustments that we had to make to the style sheet in order to publish. And that was because our focus for vendor selection was primarily InDesign expertise. So we realized there's some other elements that we should have looked at when we looked for a vendor. We should have looked at someone that had expertise in style sheet development as workflow enhancements and improvements. The last 3 months, I can say, of 2013 were probably the most dynamic of our paper publishing history when we focused on making InDesign our exclusive publishing tool. We engaged a new vendor to develop the necessary tools, and to help us make that happen, we selected DCL. And there were several reasons why, and some of them will be obvious. Past experience, we had worked with DCL on our legacy conversion project, and we're very pleased with the work we had done at that point. We also had high recommendations from customers regarding DCL. The other is, of course, InDesign knowledge, and then workflow process improvement, and finally, style sheet development. Those were the critical elements that we needed to do. But let's dig a little deeper into 2013. In November, that's when the real work began. DCL employed the Agile development methodology, and it's a daily process of developing, testing, feedback, developing, testing, feedback, and on and on. And it didn't take long for us to realize that the new tool and workflow improvements would indeed help us achieve our goals. The project spanned 14 weeks. However, you've got to consider the time of the year. It was right around the end of the year, holidays. We had a lot of downtime during that, so I would estimate we probably did this project in about 8 weeks. Automation was a top priority for us, and DCL not only provided what we originally requested, but offered up several exclusive features that we did not think possible. I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit about the Agile development methodology, because it really did save us, as well as some of the automation functionality.
Right. So, when we engaged with SAE and Becky and her team, they had an idea of where they wanted to go, but they didn't know what they didn't know.
We knew where we wanted to go.
And Becky says, it's not just having InDesign expertise, it's having style sheet expertise, but it's more than having template and style sheet expertise. The resources we brought to the project had 35 years of traditional publishing experience, going back to very early composition systems, very early page layout, desktop publishing systems. The resource had deep knowledge in production, editorial and production workflows. And while this was pretty much a production workflow, you look for automation at every step of the way. Becky mentioned it was roughly a 14-week period, which was really an 8-week period. And as we got into it, we saw opportunity to give SAE so much more than they had asked for, but we were also cognizant of this time frame where they had to get into production just after the first of the year, and we had, literally probably 8 weeks to get everything done. So while the project was scoped like this initially, I think I went back to you, Becky, 2 or 3 times for change orders because we said, well, we can do this. Do you want to do that after production? Well, can you get it done before production? Yes. Okay, so we grew the project this big, and still we could have done more, and we've talked about the other things that we can do. But, the Agile process, it worked really well because we had one primary developer with a lot of expertise. Becky had her team led by Mandy May, who, personality-wise, Ed and Mandy really worked well together, and we had this spreadsheet going back and forth. Sometimes there'd be calls twice a day. Sometimes there'd be software changes delivered twice a day. And at the end of, I think the end of January, or the middle of January, we were pretty much done.
Yes.
And had probably given you twice what you thought you were going to get going in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it worked well, and it's really a testament to the 2 primary people involved. They don't, Becky and I are standing up here talking about the success of this project, but it really is Ed Zeitz on the DCL side and Mandy May on the SAE side that made the project a success. Yep. Becky?
It's a little bit of an eye chart, but as you can see, our output changed. Where I said we had a half a column of white space, it's actually almost non-existent now. Our spacings improved within the document between heading levels and preceding content, between tables and captions, figures and captions, list items, and so on. Large graphics now we can place anywhere in the document, at the top, at the middle, at the bottom. Flexibility with the layout now belongs to the specialist, so that he or she is no longer bound by the limitations of the tool. We can do what we need to do. And I mentioned earlier that selection of the appropriate style sheet required the specialist to review the copyright statement for the paper and then manually select the correct style sheet. Well, there are 6 variations, and DCL suggested making this an automated process. And this is one of those things that we thought was impossible to do. But what it has saved in not only work efficiency, but errors. It's very easy to accidentally select the wrong style sheet, meaning republishing. So that has been a tremendous help to us. Something that I haven't mentioned but is very important, our previous process forced us to edit the XML in order to publish. Not a good thing to do. But now our XML file remains in the preferred, unedited, and pristine condition. And it is so important to us for our repurposing of content that we do. You can easily see there's a difference between our journal paper and our technical paper. All content goes in, and the output file automatically provides the right format with the right footer with no manual intervention. And with one input and 2 very different outputs, automating this eliminated an entire level of tracking. And we publish content once and in the right format. Our technical paper format includes a notched box containing all the metadata pieces. And with this example, you could have 1 author, 2 authors, 3 authors. And you're probably thinking, well, what's the big deal about this? Well, if you see that slant cannot change in length, trajectory. It has to remain absolutely at that position. And it's important because this is part of SAE's brand identity. And throughout our organization, it has caused some difficulty in implementing. But we were insistent with DCL that we do this. And it looks like, oh yeah, what's the big deal? I'm going to let Brian talk about that one.
Well, it can be a big deal, and when you're looking to automate things and make them consistent, you have to get clever. Ed figured this one out, I think, in a morning, and I can't speak to the deep technical details, but there's a bit of math involved and some scripting and other things that went on to achieve this. But it was very important to SAE, and it was important enough to them that it was important to us to make this happen and make it happen right. So I think we thrilled Becky and Mandy with getting this one done. And this is just one of many things you might encounter as you begin working with your content in InDesign. And just while we're on this, I want to make mention that Becky and her team had started down the path with another vendor. So we had something that was sort of half-baked. I mean, it was serving you, it was getting it done. But and we had a short window of time, so we had to build on what was already there. If we had started from scratch, we would have approached this a little bit differently, and some of the challenges that we had and some of the head scratching and thought process we went through, we necessarily wouldn't have had to go through. So this particular implementation makes use of a number of transforms, XML import filters, a number of scripts within InDesign. We probably would have approached it with a transformation from XML to IDML, InDesign Markup Language, to give us more control over how some of the content flows automatically as opposed to manipulating that content once it's in the InDesign with use of scripts and such. And I think this may have been one thing that could have benefited from some of the IDML capabilities that we didn't have the opportunity to use. Becky?
Well, when we started out in 2010, we had published 1,331 papers in 9 weeks. So that was our benchmark. So we're ready to launch new tools in 2014, and again, we choose the busiest time of our year to try something new. We have a shorter time to deliver. I have less staff. But with our new tools and our enhanced workflow, we not only met our delivery date, but did so seamlessly with the highest quality output. Cost reduction, I reduced costs by 4%. And some of this was attained by redeploying my resources to other projects that we wouldn't have been able to touch had we not gained some additional time. The World Congress, which is the event we're talking about for this case study, is about 50% of my budget. So with a 4% reduction in total budget, that's a significant amount. 89% of the published papers were completed by the 6-week mark. If I compare that to 2013, we only had 73% done by the 6-week mark. And the biggest thing is we were able to improve the quality, not only in the format and the spacing, the hyperlinks, but the fact that we only had to publish once. For 2014, all publishing was completed in 7 weeks. So if you go back to our benchmark of 9 weeks, we did 7 weeks with about 150 more papers in 2014. And what we did because of this, one of the things we've been asked to do was to provide our authors with more time. So we were able to provide our authors with more time to submit their final manuscript because we were seeing such efficiencies. This went a long way to ensuring that we could get more papers on time. When I compare this year to last year, I'm pleased to say that we completed all of our publishing in 6 weeks. So we gained a full week of efficiency based on this InDesign style sheet. And the reason being, I think, is we've become very comfortable with the tool, and we kind of know the ins and outs now. So with the same amount of people, approximately the same amount of papers, we were able to gain another week of efficiency. So our journey over the last 5 years has dramatically changed how content is managed and published at SAE. Automation has not only improved our efficiency, but output quality has improved as well. We continue to look at our workflows and our tools and our system for additional efficiencies, and we think we can find them. And the reason why I say that is because I would like to see our overall efficiency improve by 15%. I think it's a doable goal, and we are working towards that. And then we want to continually improve the look and feel of our technical papers. InDesign allows us to do that, as well as keep our eye on the future by perhaps providing EPUB packages to our customers for our conferences. And then finally, our next print-to-digital effort is our SAE industry standards. And this again will be an XML conversion based on JATS, the NLM DTD, and we will be using an InDesign style sheet. We're currently, it's 2 phases, and we're currently under phase 1, which is just a conversion of old content to XML, but the biggest part will be when we have to do new and revised, how do we do that? And that is phase 2. Whoops. So we do have some lessons learned to share. Although we did improve the consistency of the output and quality, and we were able to, we had volume increase while production time decreased. But in order to do this, the SAE and the DCL team demonstrated what can be achieved through collaboration, subject matter expertise, and strong project management. We did something great in a very short period of time. And looking back, I can tell you the first thing I learned was what Brian talked about underestimating the scope of the work. Because I underestimated, or we thought we knew what we wanted, I was thinking, oh, this is only a 6-week project. But by the time we got rolling, it was much more than a 6-week project, and we put some real pressure on DCL. But the Agile development methodology is really what saved us. We were able to manage scope creep very effectively, and it allowed us to meet our deadlines on time. At the end of each iteration during the Agile development process, we would have new requirements. It just happened. New requirements kept coming up. Every time we did testing, we had some new requirement that we wanted to do. And probably daily, we reviewed these new requirements and prioritized them. But it was with agreement with both the SAE and the DCL team. The other thing was, and again, Brian mentioned this, it was our vendor selection. Our first initiative with InDesign showed us what the tool could do, but our vendor selection missed those 2 critical elements, the need for style sheet development and workflow development experience. When we found DCL, we found both of those. And then we attempted to build off of our first InDesign style sheet, and again, it was nice having some of the basics defined, but it probably delayed our progress just a bit. And we went into this, meaning SAE, my team, me, went into this, we know exactly what we want this, and we don't want any more than this. But the more we talked with DCL, the more they started to challenge our thinking with the what ifs. And as they began to challenge our thinking, we started to really think about possibilities. What could we do? This also provides an excellent opportunity for someone within your team. Brian has mentioned Mandy May. She really was our project manager for this project, and it gave her a lot of opportunity to demonstrate skills, planning, prioritizing, team dynamics, risk assessment. So it's really a great development opportunity. And then I'll give Brian a chance to do some closing remarks as well, but I have to say teamwork pays dividends. Success of this project was really achieved through 2 teams coming together, sitting at the table, bringing the best of the best. I mean, we were at our best, and because of the relationship we had with DCL, it really worked to our advantage because they would challenge us. At times I wanted to say, I don't want to hear another thing. But they kept challenging, and it really did improve what we have. And you can see by the results, we are now down to 6 weeks for producing papers. And we did achieve our goals. We were able to reduce costs. We are getting the content out quicker, and the consistency and the quality of the product is much better. Yep. Brian?
Thanks, Becky. So just, my closing thoughts on this. It was a great project, great opportunity for DCL to work with a key customer in really pushing a tool that a lot of folks would like to use in this environment, but they have some limited success, and I think we showed that we can drive a lot of success in leveraging InDesign along with JATS XML. It spurred my thinking and some analysis with some of my team on, okay, where can we apply this? In similar organizations, where can we drive more automation? We've looked at a number of customer workflows with many, many steps, and how could we take this approach and maybe some other tools and really streamline processes. We've looked at workflows that might, and these are production workflows, not editorial workflows, but workflows with upwards of 15 steps. And with the combination of what we did here and some other tools, we've seen workflows where we can automate 12 or 13 of those 15 steps. So from someone deciding content is ready to lay out, going through a number of steps, grabbing metadata from other systems, pushing through for maybe it's a word source and going to conversion to XML and marrying up that metadata, and going through to automated rendering through InDesign out to PDFs, where you review the PDFs and maybe 5 or 10% need manual adjustment, and then you go into InDesign and do manual adjustment. Those are the types of things we think we can bring to some of our customers in the very short term and really drive a lot of efficiency in their production operation. Becky talks about 4%, but that was 4% of her overall budget, not just 4% of this effort on these technical papers. And 15% of efficiency gain over a 6-week period, you do that a couple years in a row, and you're really looking at, now we're 50% more efficient than we were a few years ago. So there's a lot that can be done. It's not an out-of-the-box approach where you take InDesign out and you develop some style sheets and templates. There's a lot to go into thinking about your process and thinking about the specifics of your content and your layout needs and your styles. So it's not a quick and easy process, but it is something I think that can deliver a lot of value. And maybe it's not for all of your content, but some of your content may fit into this sort of model, and we'd be more than happy to discuss in detail how it might be applied in your organizations. That's it. Questions?
Questions? Comments? Yes.
Mirko Jans Informs. How do you handle math? I mean, complex math.
So, well, in this case, math
Yes.
was handled as images.
Yes, in this case, math was handled as images.
So, math as MathML is doable, but it takes a lot of careful planning and consideration, so.
And we're doing that with our industry standards. We are converting all that math to MathML.
But how do you print it then?
I'm sorry?
How do you print that math? MathML does not print by itself, needs proper tools.
Right, so rendered through InDesign through MathML plugins in InDesign. Other questions? Jeff?
I was very excited that we have a non-life sciences content paper, so thank you for that. I was also excited that somewhere along your timeline, maybe it was 2012 or 2008, you were talking that you realized that you still had the requirement for print. What I'm really interested in is, do you see that going away anytime soon? Do you see losing the shackles of the 8.5 by 11 world anytime
What's said
soon?
in Bethesda stays in Bethesda. One of our biggest battles are our internal battles. Getting our own internal product teams to think about information differently. We still think about information as a piece of paper, a book, and we are trying very hard to convince people that we have this wealth of information and we could do so much with it, but it doesn't have to be print. We can take pieces of content, chunk it, and make really valuable information. So I do see it going away eventually, but our first hurdle is just our internal.
Are you going to be able to convince them, or just wait for them?
We're getting closer.
Wait for
They
them to
actually are
retire.
now supporting our conversion of the standards to XML. So to me, that's encouraging. And they've actually asked for some of it, so that's even better. So I think we will.
Thank you.
So I'm going to challenge Becky a little bit again, because we like challenging SAE. So I think, the notion of print going away over time, maybe the print that SAE formats and provides ahead of consumption will go away, but there's always going to be print and the need to render to some respectable format. So if you have information available through a portal and it looks pretty in HTML on the screen, but now I want to take a copy home, put it in my briefcase, take it to a meeting, you know, they're going to have to, the consumer's going to have to render that. And I think it's incumbent upon the content provider to provide some level of style sheet that will make that rendering be presentable and reflect the quality of the content in the layout. So I don't think print will ever go away. It's just that print as the primary output, if you will decline over time and maybe go away at some point. Question?
Wendell Pease Consulting Services. So I think it's really interesting that you're saying that you have had to wage the internal battles and change mindsets, because one of the things that you didn't really stress, but I think was there in your presentation, is that one of the reasons for success is that you've done a very good job at separating the editorial workflow from the production workflow. And of course, the Achilles heel of these systems is always what happens when you do copy fitting and copy editing in the PDF or in the InDesign, and then you have to get it back out again. So can you say anything about that, and how do you structure that? And was that a battle that you already had won by the time you got to the DCL and the InDesign? And what was that process like? And how has the culture had to adapt to an XML first sort of mindset before you even get to the high production value output?
Within our workflow, the editorial and production has been separate for this particular product line. It was when we took it on in 2010. We do some editorial work on the papers before they go. We look for, are all the figures there, links working, check references, things like that. But the editorial work is done prior to, and was done prior to, 2010.
So the XML going in is really good, and you don't really need to get data back out again. Is that correct?
Right.
Right. So we don't have the issues with, fitting a layout and having to edit to fit, because the content is what the content
Yes.
is, It's the same thing on the standard side. The standard side, your committees, define the standards, and the standards are what the standards are, and you paginate however many pages it takes. So it's not like a magazine where we've got so many inches to fill and we have to edit down. I thought somebody would ask about XML round tripping between InDesign, and really I think, one of Becky's goals was to make the XML, keep the XML pristine and keep it moving forward and not have much back and forth. And so, I think if there were a last minute change, it's probably best to make it in the XML and recompose. Unless you've already made a lot of tweaks to the page, you're going to lose those tweaks. But that's always going to be a question, the whole round tripping between InDesign and XML and last minute changes. It's a challenge. Yeah. Other questions? Back there? Yep.
Todd Carpenter with NISO. Just a quick question about you'd mentioned you're moving your standards to an XML. Are you using the ISO STS variant of JATS, or are you doing something different?
We're using JATS. We've taken and developed our own specs based on the NLMDTD. So, and we haven't looked how that relates to the ISO, but I think we're pretty much in compliance with the ISO piece.
Thanks.
Other questions? We've got a couple more minutes. Anything else? Right there?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kaveh from River Valley Technologies. I'm really interested in technically how you do this, but you didn't really talk at all about technical stuff.
Right. And so, Becky and I are the pretty faces on the front of this project, but
really
the technical
pretty,
people, are happy to have conversation with you, and if you give me your card, we can have that conversation. I'll get the right person on the
It
conversation.
would have been usful to actually for others to hear it, of course.
Absolutely.
But specifically, if we got one minute, I'm just guessing how you're doing it. So you're putting XML that's clean, it's been copy edited for content into InDesign, and you're saying, say, 10% of it is that needs some sort of tweak. If there's a last minute, say, a comma has to go in, what do? Do you go into InDesign or do you into XML? Or do you have to be careful where to put it in? That's the sort of thing that matters in production.
Sure.
It depends on the type of change or amount of change. So we have updated the XML and then republished, or we just edited the XML and then edited the PDF. So
You mean the InDesign file?
the InDesign file. So it's it really depends on how extensive the change is. But one of the things that we are adamant about with our authors is once you submit your final manuscript, that's it. That's final. And we don't make changes unless it's a conversion error that we've created. That's the only way we'll make a change to a paper.
No, but there's copy editing changes, there's proofreading, or every time you make a change, you want to make a change in one place, press
Yes.
the button, and as you
Yes.
say, everything comes out.
Yes.
You don't want to make any changes in InDesign.
Yes. But once it's done, it's done.
And that's a good reason why this approach isn't right for everybody or every type of product you might publish, but it may be valid for any sort of project where your content is final going going into the production cycle. More questions? Right there.
How does your content come in? Does it come in Word documents and then you convert it with an automator into XML? And then you put it into InDesign?
It comes into us Word and PDF, but we use the PDF and send that out to our vendor for conversion. And then the XML comes back in. And can you take it from there?
Yeah, basically there's a little bit of transformation. There's the import into InDesign. There's in this case, a number of scripts that are run to do a few things like select the right footer, and there's header information in the notch box, and there's a number of things with subscripted subscripts and superscripted superscripts and other things that have to be sort of massaged, if you will, before the page is finally rendered.
And we have to pull from other systems. We have to pull metadata from other systems into the actual XML file.
And so you dumping the XML into the InDesign with the style sheet, that's something that your team does, or is that something you send off?
We do.
You get the style sheet in your hand?
Yeah. So once they get the XML back from the initial conversion of the Word or PDF, it's all within SAE's production flow at that point, and their staff doing that. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, did I hear you right? You normally convert the PDF that you get?
Yes. It's the cleanest way we can do it.
Right. No further questions.
From you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
One in the back?
Can you talk a little bit about your authoring process and how papers get written and delivered to you?
Yes, we do a call for papers. We do something like 27 conferences a year, so we do call for papers for each of the conferences. Authors, if you're interested in writing a paper, you submit an abstract for the call for papers. Those are then reviewed, narrowed down to ones that are asked to write a full paper. Once they write the full paper, then it's submitted to our peer review process, which is made up of volunteers. They have to have 3 approved peer reviews. Once they're peer reviewed, then they are able to submit the final manuscript for publishing. So it's a peer review process. The content comes in through one of our proprietary systems, and then that flows right into our workflow.
So you don't proof anything back out to the authors after you just
When we publish the paper, when the paper is complete, we send the author a gratis copy. The author thinks at that point that's his proof. So that's when we become a little firm, saying final manuscript is final manuscript.
Yeah. Other questions? Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.